history, and drama. Where else would we be able to see the grandeur of the past than in the world brought to life by the magic of the silver screen? Among them, one era provides the most substantial contribution to how we've come to view South Korea's tradition and discover the world that inspired well-beloved Korean dramas like Daijangum and Dongyi.
The Chosun dynasty is one of the most influential dynasties to affect South Korea's culture today. But if reading them in a book is no longer your thing, there's a couple of places you can visit where you can experience that dynasty firsthand.
The Chosun dynasty was established in the late 14th century. It was during this period where much of modern-day Korean etiquette, cultural norms, and societal values were lifted. The most well-documented period in Korea's history. It provided a detailed picture of the past. Anything from traditional ceremonies to scientific discoveries, from manners and dress, to royal records and diplomatic affairs. It was a period that espoused cultural growth and a scholastic atmosphere. But arguably its strongest draw was its depiction of daily life. Volume after volume, stories based on their heavily stratified social hierarchy inspired sagas that would eventually grace Korean cinema. With a romanticized picture of the past, places like the Korean folk village in Gyeonggi-do thrive in the pomp and artistry of this golden age. The Korean folk village is a sprawling 243-acre living museum. Elements of traditional Korean life and culture during the Chosun dynasty are depicted here. An experiential interpretation of the Chosun dynasty, visitors can immerse themselves in South Korea's rich history. Opened in 1974, it remains one of the oldest operating amusement parks in the country and holds a place as a top tourist attraction. Less than 40 kilometers from Seoul, the South Korean capital, it's a multi-section park showing numerous replicas of traditional houses and community life. The Korean Folk Village is a popular filming location for Korean dramas as well. And how could it not be when the park aims not only to educate visitors about life during this bygone era, but magnifies its beauty amid trimmed gardens and lakeside views. Strewn throughout the grounds are craftsmen selling actual wares. Should you be interested in such novelties, these artisans not only provide you receipts, but accept international cards as well. Almost hourly, there is a cultural reenactment for visitors to enjoy. The favorite of many is the wedding ceremony. You have just been invited to a Hongnae to witness the union of a nobleman's daughter and her groom. Held in the bride's home, a theatrical display unfolds. Together with timid, doe-eyed looks, a splattering of tears, piles of pageantry and symbolism, we are given a glimpse into one of the most essential components of a traditional romantic fairy tale. Presided over by a minister or community leader, the traditional Hongnae is not simply a ceremony. It's often a product of an arranged marriage between families for an economic or social purpose. As was custom in Confucian weddings of that period, this would be the first time the bride and groom were to meet. With the groom on his horse, he takes his bride back to his home, and the procession moves on as our story comes to a close. In ancient Korea, a man's wealth is often measured by the number of gates within his home and the number of rooms to house his property. With 7,700 buildings, the Gyeongbokgung Palace at the heart of Seoul speaks volumes about the consolidated wealth of the Chosun dynasty. The Gyeongbokgung Palace is part of a broad system of royal residences within the 5 grand palaces in Seoul. The largest among the 5, it was at its height a city within a city. It housed not only the royal family, but the king's concubines, the court, their servants, government officials, and the prevailing nobility. Built as early as 1392, it was originally the residence of King Taejo, who established the Chosun dynasty. It was brought to the ground several times by internal power struggles and foreign invasions, the most significant of which was the Imjinwaran War against the Japanese that destroyed 90% of the Gyeongbokgung. The handful that remain are listed under Korean law as national treasures. Among them, the grandest is the Gyeongjin Hall, where it houses the royal throne room. Although not completely original, the location of this seat of power was used to hold special banquets and grant foreign envoys audience with the king. The Gyeonghaeru Pavilion is another hall used to hold important and special state banquets during the Chosun dynasty. Surrounded by a rectangular man-made lake, the royal pavilion is set upon 48 massive stone pillars. It was constructed with Confucian ideals on balance and harmony. But it is the Gwanghwamun Gate, or Southern Gate, that provides the lasting image of the Gyeongbokgung Palace. With a view of the royal throne room north of it, and the rest of the Gwanghwamun Public Square at its other end, it is a barrier between past and present. From the annals of the Chosun dynasty, the world's longest comprehensive record of a single dynastic period, the Gyeongbokgung Palace drums up a dreamy picture of its past and the ever-evolving construction of the original 4.5 million square foot palatial compound. Today, there are only 36 buildings currently rebuilt at the Gyeongbokgung, but this does not deflate our imagination of its preceding immensity. The grounds of today's Gyeongbokgung are extensive and spare no cost in further embellishing it. Adjacent to the Gyeongbokgung is the National Folk Museum, a towering structure that exhibits over 98,000 artifacts. Another popular attraction for history buffs and drama fiends alike, out to enjoy this 2-for-1 experience. As guides chatter away about royal colors and strict traditions, adherence to prevailing Confucian beliefs, and the tricky bits about concubines and political controversies, it's no wonder why the Chosun period is a wellspring of exciting storylines. Certainly, movies shot in historic settings lend a degree of authenticity to the cinematic work, making it easier for moviegoers to engross themselves in the fictional world. Even in pockets of historic sites like the Hwasong Fortress, where dramas like Daijang-gum and Dongyi have also been filmed, these historic sites create for us an atmosphere of realism you can enjoy with every visit. The Hwasong Fortress was built during the Joseon Dynasty. Today, it's the city center of Suwon City in the province of Gyeonggi. Enclosed within a 5.74-kilometer fortress wall, it represents the pinnacle of 18th century military architecture in Korea, earning it the honor of being a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Flanked by its 4 gates, it was equipped with turrets and artillery towers. Its battle-worn stone walls carefully trace the hilly terrain of the city, making it one of the most formidable architectural feats of its time. Today, the experience in Hwasong allows guests a ride through time on motorized palanquins that weave through the existing landmarks. A mixed scene of formidable ramparts against charming parks are all reminiscent of the time when Hwasong Fortress was not only a military compound, but a seat of provincial governance as well. Records show a detailed map of the Hwasong Fortress and chronicles the visits of many important figures, most notably King Cheongjo, the 22nd king of the Joseon Dynasty. Known today as the 8-day parade, his visits were intended as a pilgrimage in honor of his late father. In addition, extensive civil and military exams, as well as military exercises, were carried out to coincide with the visit at the Hwasong Fortress. In the 500-year rule of the Joseon Dynasty, the threat of war has always been imminent. The conflict that plagued the dynasty was brutal, and the stories written from it could rival any political thriller. So, during this period, much emphasis was placed on the development of martial arts, Korean weaponry, and the strengthening of their military prowess. As a welcome treat, guests may participate by trying their hand at gungsi, the Korean traditional bow, adding a personal insight into the surrounding imagery.